unfiltered discussions, unexpected guests. No topic is off limits, from sex and relationships to the human condition, personal anxieties, and so much more. The only talk show of its kind in the world. This is The Last Show with David Cooper.
Hello and welcome to The Last Show. We cover a bunch of science on the program, and you're going to learn things on the show tonight. Here are some of those things. Videos you see online these days, they can be fake, but when you know one is fake, could it still change your mind? There's hot, fresh off the presses, new research showing that AI-generated videos can change your opinion, even when you know they're fake, even when they're labeled as fake. So, in approximately 10 minutes, we'll break down what that means for truth and trust in the age of deepfakes. You won't want to miss it. Then, after that, the three most sexy letters. It's such a sexy ailment, I'm pretty sure the S stands for sexy. It's IBS. We'll have a gastroenterologist on to demystify the ailment. I myself am a sufferer, so I got questions. Halfway through the hour, it's everything you wanted to know about irritable bowel syndrome, or in my case, irate, not irritable. Those are some of the topics we will cover tonight. There will be more. You will learn more. It's going to be a great show. It's a packed show. But for now, let's dive in with some science news.
Want to be part of The Last Show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644.
As the planet warms, there are a lot of negative downstream consequences. See what I did there? Stream, because streams of water flowing off the glaciers. But nobody ever thinks about the penguins, the poor penguins. And the good news is the penguins might be adapting to warm weather. We're here with Jesse Rogerson. We're covering science news. Jesse is a professor at York University, an astrophysicist. I said that right. Jesse, welcome to the program.
Nailed it. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So the penguins, I worry about them. When I think of the ice caps melting, I think, what will the penguins do? I don't care about us. I don't care about the rest of the planet. I care about the penguins. But things might actually not be so bad for them.
Well, it depends on the species. So one thing to keep in mind here is that all climate change happens everywhere and it affects the entire Earth, but it is accentuated, the effects of it, in different ecosystems. And one of those is at the poles, both north and south. And in the Antarctic, the warming that's happening across the planet is about 4 times faster than the warming elsewhere on the planet, on average. So it's accelerating.
Worrisome, yeah.
Yeah, so that's a problem. And so what these scientists, they're worried about the penguins too. So they went down, they set up a whole bunch, they had these all like 70 time-lapse cameras. So they were like set up all these cameras near the breeding grounds of these various species of penguins, specifically the Adelie, the chinstrap, and the Gentoo. And they were just monitoring. They started monitoring in 2012, and they were looking at where they set up their breeding grounds, when they do it, how long it lasts, the number of chicks, all that stuff, right? All the stuff that goes with breeding. And they, over this like 10-year time span of tracking it, what they noticed is that as things got warmer, all 3 of the species they were tracking started doing their nesting and their breeding earlier and earlier and earlier. So much so that some of them were as much as 24 days earlier than normal in the spring.
Is that a bad thing?
Well, it depends on your species. So there's, for example, the Gentoos are actually kind of flourishing here. So the Gentoo penguins, they're more able to set up breeding grounds in a variety of spaces. So they're less worried about like having ice or having open rock or whatever. They could do it anywhere. And they also eat a larger variety of food. So when they shift earlier in the year, they can just adapt to what food is available. They can adapt to what nesting grounds are available, and they actually are flourishing. But they're doing that at the expense of a couple of the other species that require the specific type of like the ice. They do their nesting on the ice. They eat a specific kind of fish that is only available. And with the Gentoos sort of invading that niche, that ecological niche, it's now pushing out other penguin species. So the short answer is that some are doing good, some are doing bad, and the ones that are doing bad are the ones that have specific needs.
Interesting. So mostly just disruption and potential the biodiversity could decrease, because if these one species thrive from climate change and push out the other ones, those ones will go extinct or have severe population depletion.
Exactly. This isn't like, the biggest problem with climate change in general is disruption, and we don't know the effects. Like, you've heard of like the food web. Like, nature is so interconnected, and it's such a delicate balance, and there's gives and takes all over the place, and nature's able to correct. But when we enforce an outside variable of massive change of climate on a short time scale, that has effects that we cannot model. We just can't. Not to that detail. So we're stuck with following what's happening, seeing what's happening to these species, and the fallout from it could be a variety of things. We just don't know. Let's hope that as we do more of these studies, humans take more steps to reduce climate change. But I don't know. I don't see any of that happening on like a political side.
No, I don't either. And the next time you're in your private jet or driving your Hummer that didn't pass an emissions test, you can't say, hey, I'm helping the penguins. You might be helping one penguin, but you're hurting the rest of them.
Yeah, that one penguin's doing great. Yes.
When I once saw a documentary about a vet who went around the world helping animals. It's a friend of mine, this guy named Dr. Cliff. And at the end, there was a Q&A, and this Romanian guy who was running the film panel started asking the vet questions about penguins repeatedly. Even though there were no penguins in the documentary. And so someone would ask a thoughtful question about veterinarian science, and then the next question, this Romanian guy would go, but what about the penguins? And it's just, whenever I hear people say, what about the penguins, I'm reminded of this moment. And it had to be their story, so I'm sort of regretting telling it to you on the radio. Let's move on.
I wish I was.
Let's go to monkeys, our distant cousins, and how smart they are, how well they work together, how they use knowledge, because they kind of got brains that aren't so different than ours.
I love studying intelligence in animals. I mean, I don't study it. I love reading about intelligence in animals because I think that humans tend to think that we're like the only smart thing on the planet, and we're such geniuses. We have this hubris. We're such geniuses that we've been able to uncover the rules of nature and been able to uncover how the sun moves in the sky, when really it's just because we're an animal, we're a species that's been living in this environment for hundreds of thousands of years, and knowledge gets built into the biology. Knowledge gets built into the patterns, into the social structures. And this is a great example of it. It's a group of spider monkeys that were being followed by a group of scientists, and they were interested in how knowledge transfers from one to the other. So they did this from 2012 to 2017. They literally went into the forests and followed these spider monkeys. They're known for forming little groups and then breaking off into smaller groups and then coming back to their bigger groups again. So they have these social structures that are kind of like friend groups that cycle, break off into smaller ones, and then come back together. And they were interested how the breaking apart and reforming of the social group affects the knowledge transfer. So they followed them around, and they noticed that the spider monkeys were going out and investigating portions of the forest, of the trees, of the canopy, and recognizing where good food sources are. And then they would come back, share the knowledge with the group somehow communicate it with them, and then the entire group would know where the good food was and where it wasn't, even if not all members of the group had visited those places in the forest. And that's just a really cool demonstration of group intelligence at work.
Which is not unlike what we show. Well, it's actually, I would say we show group lack of intelligence as a species, but it's intelligence nonetheless. I think that one of the greatest arguments for why we haven't found intelligent life out in the cosmos is I'm not sure we found it here on Earth. But side note, do they know how the monkeys are communicating? There must be some language that we're not getting there.
That's a good question. I don't have a great answer for that. I mean, monkeys are able to, species are able to communicate with each other through a variety of ways, sounds and motions and leading and change and showing. So I'm sure that they're getting their message across, but I don't have the exact answer.
Now, when we come back from the break with Jesse Rogerson as we cover some science news, I'm sure you've all seen deep fake videos. If you see something wild happening and then somebody tells you, oh, no, don't worry, it's an AI video, a new research paper says you can still be swayed by it, which is just even more alarming than I already was alarmed, if that makes sense. Jesse Rogerson is here. We'll discuss this story, this scientific study, and more after the break.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644.
How do you make chicken nuggets like 7,000% better? Short answer, you let Taco Bell make them. Long answer, start with all white meat chicken nuggets, bread them in crunchy tortilla chips, and serve them with Hidden Valley Diablo Ranch. Yep, that's Hidden Valley Ranch mixed with Taco Bell Diablo sauce. It's exactly what it sounds like, and somehow even better. Simple math, spicy results. Crispy chicken nuggets from Taco Bell, a brand new classic. At participating U.S. Taco Bell locations for a limited time only, while supplies last.
For those who know that questioning everything includes questioning this show's existence. The Last Show with David Cooper.
We are here. It's Science News. Jesse Rogerson is here. He's a professor at York University. Check out his book, Daydreaming in the Solar System, available wherever books are sold. I recently bought it. It's got a great cover. That's all I know about it. But I will read it. I will read it, Jesse. Welcome to the program. You'd like to think that the scary ability to create deep fake images and AI videos and even like writing and fake social media accounts, you'd like to think that if it were just labeled, hey, this is made by AI, that we would kind of ignore it. We'd not be influenced by it. We wouldn't have any impression of it. We wouldn't change our opinions based on it. A new research paper says, maybe you would. Maybe you do. Do you want to walk me through it?
Yeah, this scares the crap out of me, and it's not just about deep fakes and influence. It's like just the general ability for people to have the cognitive sense to work through what they're seeing and make sense of it in their eyes. Like, so for my students, I talk about the use of ChatGPT all the time and how it leads them astray. It really does lead them astray very frequently. Anyway, what the researchers were interested here is, I think we all had this worry that deception is the problem. You know, you see an AI video or you see a video on your socials and it's doing something and you're like, oh, that's really scary. And someone would invoke this video to help influence the way you feel about a policy. Maybe it's about guns, or maybe it's about vaccines, or maybe it's about a million other things that we all yell at each other about, right?
Oh, great. And I don't like where this is going, but please keep going.
So you worry about deception as the biggest problem. So then the answer to deception is education, right? You show people, you're like, that video that you're looking at is a fake video. So would that change your perception? So the way they did this is they ran a series of online studies. They had they did 3 of them. They had a range of participants in the hundreds. And what they did is they would show them videos. Some would be real and some would be deep faked, made specifically for the study. And the videos would be an interview with a person who is admitting to doing a crime or admitting to do a transgression against a friend or something like that. And for some of them, they were given the warning, hey, this video is a fake video. And for some of them, they weren't. For others, they were given a warning that was more generic, a warning along the lines of like, fake videos exist in the world. You should be aware of this, right? And then they watched the videos, and after this, they asked them a series of questions. And basically, it was like asking them to judge the person. You know, was the person guilty? Was the person not guilty? Should they have done this? Should they not have done this? It was about the various social situations they were in. And even if, this is the crazy thing, is that even if they were told it was a fake video, those people still judged that person in a negative way, indicating that even though it wasn't real, they were still influenced by the way the video presented the information.
It's so weird, like the psychological, like subliminal things going on. You see a video, you're even told it's fake, but just the very act of seeing it and hearing it can influence you. We got to be careful with these fake political videos that go around. Like, there's been a lot of, I don't know if anyone's turned on the news in the last 30 seconds, maybe not this show because we try to keep it mostly science news, but like turn on the news and then go on Facebook and you see fake videos that are obviously trying to influence you politically in a polarized way. And you don't know if, and then you don't know if the real stuff is real, but that's a different conversation.
Yeah. So this worries me for 2 reasons.
Just seeing it can influence you. This means,
and so there's the 2 problems where it's like you don't know if it's real or not. But I think the very act of being shown something is going to change your perception about something. This almost reminds me of the Heisenberg uncertainty principle in physics, which is a whole other thing. But like seeing this is also what I think politicians do very often is they'll float ideas. They'll say an idea and they'll sort of test the waters if that idea is good or not, and then they'll backtrack or they'll move forward depending. And I feel like that's what these AI videos do is they sort of push you around and like, what are you willing to stand? What are you not willing to stand? And if you aren't prepared for it, I think we need education in literacy, but we also need to understand our own psychological responses. And the scientists in this study said specifically they don't know what the psychological mechanism is that allows you to still be influenced even if you know it's not real. And they're interested in digging deeper into that.
So what you're saying is that weird conspiracy theory prone, like far gone uncle sharing things on social media, even though it's probably fake or not quite the whole truth. You're best served just not looking at it at all, rather than that, it's a train wreck. I want to see what he's saying because he's so out there and it's entertaining. It's better to just like not turn on news sources that obviously have fake stuff, I guess.
Yeah, but then you ask the question, you're like, I guess this is all about trust. It's all about confirming your own ideas and being open to other ideas.
Yes.
These are massive, massive character flaws that humanity has, right? And we need to work on it.
Yes, it is about trust. It is about, where you should get your ideas. I agree, but this is just like a tool that anyone can use in their pocket. Show you something fake, even if you know it's fake, even if you guess it's fake, it can still subtly influence you.
And
that's scary.
My big advice for all of this, whenever I talk to my friends about, or anybody, my students as well, is that you shouldn't, if you're labeling yourself as part of a team, like I'm part of this group and I'm part of that group, and you only believe what they say, then you're already like up against it, right? We're not part of teams. We're all part of the group. We're all working together.
We're part of the human team.
Human team.
All right. This last science story is so cool, and it's in your wheelhouse. You are an astrophysicist. An old map of the sky that we thought was like completely lost to time, like this old parchment paper kind of thing. It was discovered, and it tells us what the sky looked like a long time ago, which is kind of cool because the sky shifts a bit, like, stars change their position and stuff. Am I understanding this right?
Yeah, so this was I teach a course called History of Astronomy, and we do the entire history of astronomy. It's mostly from a European perspective, unfortunately, but it does a decent job of covering the story from early humans 10,000 years ago or so up until today. And one of the big parts we focus on is ancient Greek astronomy and like 600 BCE to about 200 CE or so, that ancient Greek into ancient Rome. And one of the most notable people during that time was this guy named Hipparchus. Hipparchus was apparently one of the best observers on the planet. He would go out, he would observe the sky, and he made very meticulously drawn maps according to lore. Now, his original maps of the sky have been lost, but they were copied and changed and added to by other philosophers of the time, Ptolemy and Al-Sufi, to name a couple. But the original maps of Hipparchus have apparently not been seen. So enter this group. What they did is what people used to do is they used to reuse parchment paper. Parchment, if nobody's been using it for a while, they would like use some chemicals, they would wash off all the ink, and then they would write over top of it. And so this group has been looking at all these old ancient parchments and finding and seeing that you can see it with your eyes, that there's stuff smudged on there from like the last time it was used. But how do you like get the information out? And they use a technique called X-ray fluorescence. And the different inks light up in different ways depending on the light that you hit on it. And if you do it in the correct way, you can see like layer 1, layer 2, layer 3, layer 4, all the way down.
We just have about a minute. What did they discover in these old parchments or whatever?
My favorite result so far is that they found Hipparchus's catalog. They found that it was as precise as someone would have said from hundreds of years ago. So the lore lived up. But what really love about this story is you have Hipparchus's maps, and then you can compare them to Ptolemy's maps and see what was taken and what was changed and what was added. You can see the growth of the knowledge from one generation to the next. And that is an important step that we were missing, is how was science evolving of the sky over hundreds of years? And now we have a big piece of the puzzle, Hipparchus's map.
Cool. The science of the history of science we're discussing here with Jesse Rogerson, who's a professor at York University. Jesse, thanks for bringing these stories to the show, giving us some updates on what's going on in the science world. I appreciate you coming on.
No worries. Always happy to be here.
Coming up after the break, a topic for my heart. We are digging into IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, or in my case, irate bowel syndrome. Yes, I actually suffer from this. What it actually is, why so many people live with it, and how it involves your brain, not just your stomach. And I promise we won't be in the gutter, at least not much, as a gastroenterologist helps us separate myths, anxieties, and real gut science.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644. We're here because your heightened awareness deserves heightened entertainment. The last show with David Cooper.
What happens when nature calls far too often with far too much vigor? IBS is what happens, and we're here to discuss just that with Dr. Wendi LeBrett, a gastroenterologist. It is a hard word, Wendi, and I called you this last time when you were here, and I did like it. You're a professional fart demystifier.
Yes. But also a poop demystifier.
All things demystified that come out of your body in one direction. You can find Wendi at SoCalGastroDoc. Okay, Wendi, Dr. Wendi, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me back.
Okay, I have IBS myself, and I'd like to think the I doesn't stand for irritable. It stands for irate. My bowels are angry, but I do like to think the S doesn't stand for syndrome. It stands for sexy, because it is one of the most attractive. No, it's not.
Well, there's the Hot Girls Have IBS slogan. I don't know if you've heard of that.
Is there?
Yeah. It goes viral. It's one of those TikTok trends.
I love that.
Hot girls have IBS, so hot guys have IBS too.
I guess so. Ladies, I'm taken, unfortunately. Okay. For those who don't know about it or just hear about IBS on the butt end of jokes, which is something I am guilty of just doing, set it up for me in a more medical sense. What exactly does it mean? What constitutes IBS versus just having a tummy ache every now and again?
Yeah, I think actually most people misunderstand what IBS is, but specifically it's when your gut and your brain don't communicate well. And so then you have either diarrhea, constipation, or both. So abnormal changes in your bowel movements. And then you also have pain or discomfort associated with it. And there's no perfect test for it. When you look inside the gut, we don't see any visual signs of inflammation. Hence, it's irritable bowel syndrome.
And it's interesting you bring the brain into this. Is the brain and the way your brain communicates with your digestive system, especially towards the end, is that a big component here?
Yeah, so this is technically considered a disorder brain-gut interaction. So with a condition like IBS, we think that the brain plays a really important role. So when I tell my patients and I diagnose them with IBS, I think the belief out there is that, oh, you're just giving me this diagnosis of IBS because you don't know what's going on and it's just a catch-all term. But actually, what we understand is that it's really due to signaling issues with the brain and the gut. So there's miscommunication from the brain to the gut and the gut to the brain.
Interesting. And it's really your brain that tells your digestive tract, like, hey, maybe you want to hurry things along. Maybe you want to add more water in there. Maybe you want to have a sense of urgency and cause the body to run to the bathroom. That's such an interesting part that I don't think people consider, really.
Yeah, and it's, to do with, how your brain tells your gut you should move faster or you should move slower. But then it's also how your gut signals back to the brain. So something normal like food in the intestines, gas in the intestines. People with IBS, their gut tells their brain, oh, that hurts, that's painful, even though that's a normal sensation that most people live their lives without feeling bothered by.
And there's an incredible amount of nerves in your large intestine. It's an incredibly sensitive area. So something that shouldn't cause this feeling of there's something wrong ends up doing it because of how sensitive it is down there.
Exactly. So we think that people with IBS have hypersensitivity. So normal sensations become very painful or uncomfortable for them.
Growing up, we would go out for dinner, and my mom, she'd always have what she called a nutty cone, which is what she just called drumsticks. And for sure, she's lactose intolerant. We come from a population of high incidence of lactose intolerance, Ashkenazi Jews. I have it too. My mom would have the ice cream, no lactate pill, and then she'd be screaming at my dad to get home, stinking up our Dodge Caravan with the wood panel. I'm just painting you a picture of how it was in the 90s. Is it possible that I kind of like got it from her? Because I have all the same stuff as her.
Yeah, so lactose intolerance is a little bit different from IBS because if you take lactate or avoid lactose, then you don't have the symptoms. But certainly for IBS or sensitive stomachs in general, we see that it does run in families. So that there is something inherited about having that disorder of brain-gut communication. And we know it's also related to conditions like migraines or fibromyalgia. So it's like a pain sensory condition.
Now, food for me is such a minefield. Like, I can't have French fries without knowing, and I'll eat them anyway because why let the potatoes win? And French fries are just delicious.
Well, that's a really sad one to have it has as a trigger food, French fries.
You know, I'm like and you're probably going to tell me I shouldn't do this, but I eat the foods that trigger me as long as I like know that I'm going to get home afterward. Dating is incredibly hard for me. I got to eat like white rice for a week before going on a date. Thank God I'm in a long-term relationship. But like, why do certain foods trigger it? Certain foods don't?
Yeah, so for some people, we know that people with IBS have increased sensitivity to certain types of foods. So certainly FODMAPs, I don't know if you've heard of the low FODMAP diet. So these are certain types of carbohydrates that we don't break down very well as humans, which means the bacteria in our gut break them down or ferment them. So these are highly fermentable carbohydrates, and they tend to be people's triggers. So things like beans, broccoli, onions, garlics, these are sort of known triggers. Lactose can be a trigger for some people. And so there are certain foods that are known triggers. But for some people with IBS, all foods are a trigger. Like eating in general hurts. And so then it's less about avoiding these trigger foods and it's more about trying to fix that communication between the brain and the gut.
Well, how can we do that? I'm asking for a friend. I'm not taking notes, and I'm not having you on the show to solicit free medical advice. I promise.
Yeah, this is like a free consult over here.
Yeah.
So there's a number of different ways. So there's a line of therapy called brain gut behavioral therapy. So you work with a GI psychologist. So this is a psychologist.
What, a gastroenterologist psychologist?
Yeah.
I didn't even know that existed.
And so for people, especially for people where like stress, anxiety plays a big component for their IBS symptoms, they help you learn like relaxation exercises. There's cognitive behavioral therapy for the gut, so gut-directed behavioral therapy. So there's all these like brain communication exercises you can do. And then we also treat people with medications. So we call them neuromodulators. Traditionally, they are used as drugs for psychiatric reasons, but we're not using them at doses or for that purpose. It's because the same neurotransmitters that are in your brain are also in your gut. And so we're really targeting those nerve signaling issues.
I want to get in a few more questions real quick. Like, I know I just talked about eating French fries, even though they give me a hard time. Are there things that people shouldn't ignore if they have sensitive stomachs, like red flags, something signaling that something's wrong, that they shouldn't keep doing it and saying, oh, everything's fine?
Well, I certainly wouldn't self-diagnose yourself with IBS. If you are having symptoms, especially if they impair with your quality of life, so your ability to go to work, go out with friends, socialize, like definitely get that checked out, because we are also seeing a lot of cases of an increase in young onset colorectal cancer. So young people being diagnosed with colon cancers. And a lot of young people will tell me, I thought it was IBS for years. Somebody else told me it was IBS, and then it ends up being cancer or something more serious. So certainly don't ignore that.
You sound like me, and rectal cancer runs in my family, and I'm turning 40 this year, and I promised my girlfriend I'd get my first colonoscopy, but that's a conversation for another time. A lot of trial and error advice online, a lot of people saying things who don't really know what they're talking about, or they didn't study it. Is there any advice that you've heard that you're just like, that's not quite the full story, that you would want to get?
Oh, for IBS?
Correction out there? Yeah.
I think there's lots of products being sold out there that are very questionable for IBS. So certainly look at it with a degree of skepticism and then try to discuss it with a medical professional or get your advice from someone who's actually, experienced with treating IBS. There are certainly supplements that are very effective for IBS, but most of them are not effective. So be skeptical about those ones.
And this last question, again, asking for a friend, not me, not soliciting free advice. Is there one assuring thing or reassuring thing you can tell people listening who either live with IBS or maybe a loved one does to make them feel a little better when they're frustrated or maybe dismissed or something like that?
It gets better. There are treatments out there that work. You don't have to live and suffer for your entire life. We can certainly make you feel better. And so getting care from the right person can certainly help.
You can follow Dr. Wendi LeBrett at SoCal GastroDoc. She makes great videos informing you about these topics and more. Dr. Wendi, it has been a joy having you back on the show. I'm so glad you came back.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It ain't fun when the government gaslights its people, telling them things happen one way when in reality they happened in another. There are some wild examples throughout history of authoritarian regimes doing this, and we'll cover them in a minute.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644.
This episode is brought to you by State Farm. Checking off the boxes on your to-do list is a great feeling. And when it comes to checking off coverage, a State Farm agent can help you choose an option that's right for you. Whether you prefer talking in person, on the phone, or using the award-winning app, it's nice knowing you have help finding coverage that best fits your needs. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
We work hard to strike the right amount of intelligence and ignorance. The last show with David Cooper.
Something happens, and then everyone tells you it didn't. You feel like you're being messed with. That is called gaslighting. There is psychology behind it. There's a psychology behind the fake reality that somebody makes you feel. And, of course, conspiracy theories around it. How's that for an introduction? We're talking about famous moments in gaslighting here with Nathan Radke, a conspiracy theories studies professor. I'm killing this introduction, by the way.
I mean, you came really close. You almost had it right on the runway, and then at the last second, there was a bit of a jolt, but I think we made it.
Okay, anyone who heard all that, you didn't hear it. Take two. Nathan Radke, a professor of conspiracy studies at Humber Polytechnic, who co-hosts the Uncover Up Conspiracy Cast. That's a great podcast. My producer always puts that Nathan is an alleged non-alien as part of his credentials. We're going to talk about gaslighting and the times that governments did it to its people. Nathan, welcome to you.
Well, thanks for having me on.
So I know I just gave a crude definition. I'm sure you've got a better one. I know it's based on an old-time film called like The Gaslight or something. What is gaslighting? This term gets thrown around a lot by armchair psychologists on social media. Can you just give me a quick definition?
No, absolutely. So, of course, there's a really complicated relationship between truth and knowledge and power. And talking about conspiracies, the entire focal point of a conspiracy is that the knowledge of the truth is hidden from us by people in power, and in hiding that truth, they're able to get more power. And one of the clearest examples of that relationship is when people in positions of power gaslight the population. Now, what gaslighting is, unfortunately, it's a very useful concept. It's not just lying. It's not just concealing the truth. It's way more insidious. It's way more dangerous than that. Gaslighting is a kind of power play in which somebody tries to get you to believe them instead of your own experience and reason. And so to do this, what they do is they deliberately present you with a distorted reality while trying to make you think that the real distortions are coming from your own brain.
And we hear it in abusive relationships where something bad happens and then one partner just says, that didn't happen. You know, basically it calls into question your whole experience, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, exactly. And when you talk about abusive relationships, this is a terrible form of abuse. It's a form of manipulation because it tries to throw uncertainty into a person's own perceptions and thinking. And so obviously when this happens in a relationship, it's an awful, terrible thing. And it's also a terrible thing when it comes from people in political power. And where we often see this coming from, in the same way we see it coming from terrible partners, we see it coming from terrible leaders. Authoritarians in particular find the gaslighting move to be a really tempting one because authoritarians tend to act in ways that protect their own power, even when that comes at the expense of the public. And so to a tyrant, the public's there to serve them, not the other way around. But if you do that long enough, the people might get fed up with it, and they might rise up against you. So both lousy leaders and lousy partners, rather than changing anything about the way that they act or their actions or themselves, they try to change the way that we see reality itself. And we've got some pretty wild examples from history.
Should we start with the Baghdad bomb? I feel like this is a good place to start.
Oh yeah, good old Baghdad Bob. So back in 2003, the American military is invading Iraq. The American military, of course, much stronger than the Iraqi military. But the Iraqi people had a minister of information, al-Sahaf, and he became known in Western media as Baghdad Bob because he would be on TV constantly, every day, telling the Iraqi people how well the war was going for the Iraqi government. On the daily, you would have all these brave stories about how the Americans were being furiously routed and they were being driven out, and any second the Iraqi troops were going to be in Washington, D.C., and he was saying this despite the fact that the Iraqi citizens, of course, could just look out their window and see how things were going. They could see American tanks in Iraqi cities. But despite that, up until basically the moment that he was captured by American forces, Baghdad Bob was on the TV and on the radio telling everybody, what you see isn't real. What's actually happening is we're winning this war.
I wonder if he was in like a prisoner camp, a war prisoner camp in the U.S. base or wherever he got taken to, in his cell, saying how well things were going. Like, do you think these people believe what they're saying? Like, what's the psychology of the gaslighting at this point?
I mean, this is such an interesting question, and we ask this about gaslighters, we ask it about cult leaders. Are they getting high on their own supply is the question. And I think it's even more strange and complicated than that. It isn't a question of whether they believe their own lies. It's that the idea of truth entirely is jettisoned. It's abandoned. It doesn't matter. Truth is irrelevant. What matters is the narrative you're trying to push. You're fully committed to that narrative above all other things.
Are there examples of this from Western governments, from like liberal democracies? Like, is there a time when the U.S. government did this? Is there a time when, European governments did something like this?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we can, if we're sticking with war for a second, we can talk about the Vietnam War. Now, of course, famously, the Vietnam War was an extremely difficult war for the Americans to fight, despite having, a far more powerful military than North Vietnam. They were dragged into a war for all sorts of reasons. Asymmetrical warfare is sometimes hard to fight. And so the Vietnam War went very badly for the people of Vietnam and also badly for America. But during that war, for years and years and years, American families were being told by government spokespeople just how well the war was going. In the initial stages of it, they were even told that it wasn't a war at all. And this is despite evidence in the form of news footage on their screens and their sons coming home on planes in coffins.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, they basically said, it's going great, we're winning it. But when they actually got to the ground in Vietnam, it was an incredibly tough, difficult, bloody, deadly war to fight that was basically lost by both sides, which I guess is every war, but it was certainly true of this one.
And it's certainly a lesson that the American government learned about gaslighting. Because in that war, in the Vietnam War, the American government had very little direct control over journalists. And so while the American government might have been trying to present the war in one narrative, because there was independent journalists doing actual work on the ground, it was very, very difficult for the American government to push that narrative when people could see with their own eyes what was happening on TV screens.
Freedom of the press, very important. I'm sure this happened in like the USSR. I mean, this is a government that was totalitarian at times. This was not necessarily a great government to be involved with back then. Were there examples of gaslighting back then?
Oh, absolutely. So the thing is, a key part of being a strong man leader is being, strong. But because time comes for all of us, often authoritarian regimes, they tell absurd and hilarious lies about how robust a dictator is, even as their body is decaying and falling into pieces, and their mind is basically turning into goo. And we have an example from the 1970s. The leader back then was Brezhnev. Now, I don't know if you remember Brezhnev. He was like the most Soviet guy ever. It's like even in real life, he was in black and white. This was just a grim sort of Frankenstein of a human being. He's the head of the Soviet Union. He was clearly in the 1970s just deteriorating in front of the entire world. His speech was slurred. He was going off on weird tangents. He'd lose his place when he was talking, generally just acting like a malfunctioning robot. But as this was going on, the state media in the Soviet Union was going on and on about how tireless he was, how energetic he was, how engaged he was in the decision-making process. But if we want a real masterclass in some next-level political gaslighting, we'll stay in the Soviet Union, but we need to go back to the 1950s.
Okay, well, let's do that after the upcoming break. I always find this stuff so interesting in the Soviet Union because when the government changes its position and basically says this is now the state thinking and it was totally different before, there's still a paper trail. Like there was newspapers, there was books, there was encyclopedias, there was, things that would need to be revised in order to fit with the state narrative. And I think that's the thing that makes it so easy to question the government. Like I saw in the news with my own eyes, I read in a book with my own eyes the previous day things were one way, and now the government is telling me things are another. So we'll do an example of that here with Nathan Radke. Check out his podcast. It's called the Uncover Up Conspiracy Cast. Nathan is a professor of conspiracy studies at Humber Polytechnic. Nathan, did I get it all right this time around?
Nailed it.
All right, we'll come back. Don't believe your lying eyes. We're talking famous moments in gaslighting on Conspiracy Corner. That up next.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644.
Every day at Sierra, you'll find top brand apparel, footwear, and gear for 20 to 60% less than department and specialty store prices. And during clearance time at Sierra, those incredible prices are 40 divided by 2.5, carry the 1, even lower. And when you shop clearance at Sierra, you can save a whole lot more on everything you need to get active and outside. That's a lot of saving. Epic brands, vast selection, teeny tiny prices. That's Sierra. Visit your local Sierra store today or shop online at Sierra.com.
Smart, sharp, and slightly unhinged. Late night's fresh perspective. The last show with David Cooper.
All right, we're talking moments in gaslighting in history. We're here with Nathan Radke. It is Conspiracy Corner. Nathan is a professor of conspiracy studies at Humber Polytechnic in Toronto, Canada. Check out his podcast. It's called the Uncover Up Conspiracy Cast. Some of the topics we do on our show, this show, Nathan does a deep dive on his podcast. Nathan, welcome back to the program.
Always have to be here.
Hypothetical, I'm living in a fake totalitarian country that doesn't exist. There is a hero. The government loves them. They're the best citizen in the whole country. They publish it in the newspapers. They put it in books. And the next day they decide that they want to execute him and he's an enemy of the state. They tell me he's always been an enemy of the state. And yet I have the newspaper on my table from last week saying he wasn't. What am I supposed to believe?
I mean, that's tricky, right? In order to pull off gaslighting like that, you've got to be Olympic level. You've got to be professional level. And we do have an amazing example of this. So in the Stalinist Soviet Union, which is always a terrible way to start a sentence, the head of the secret police was just an absolute piece of garbage named Lavrentiy Beria. And amongst other things, he's the guy in charge of rounding people up out of their homes and putting them in gulag prison camps, carrying out mass deportations, an uncountable number of executions. And Beria, just as a person, just a terrible, awful human being in a bunch of different ways. But of course, in Stalin's Soviet Union, the state's the one who gets to decide what reality was. And so nothing is real except that which is allowed by the state to be real, even when the truth is clear for everyone to see with their own eyes. You'd be told there was plenty of food where your cupboards were bare. You'd be told the leader was great and wise and kind when you knew the opposite was true. And even if the state made an abrupt U-turn regarding what everyone was expected to believe, you're supposed to get on board with that ideological whiplash instantly and go along with a new approved reality as if it had been true all along. So under Stalin, this guy Beria, the head of the secret police, who wasn't a monster, he's a great and noble hero of the Soviet Union. And they put out an official state encyclopedia, and in that there's a large entry talking about Beria's heroism and his devotion and his many accomplishments. But here's the thing about tyrants, they tend to end poorly. And so after Stalin died, his reality dies along with him. And the people who are closest to him, they counted on his reality. And now they're in trouble. And Beria, this awful man, gets arrested and then executed. But there's a problem.
The encyclopedias!
The encyclopedias, it's sitting in people's homes. It's on paper. The state had spent years singing the praises of Beria and this And the Great Soviet Encyclopedia has sent out an entire entry on the glories of this guy who had just been executed as a treasonous monster. It's all printed there.
So the big lesson here is don't put out a state encyclopedia? Is that how you fix this problem? Is that why the U.S. and Canada don't put out state encyclopedias?
But here's what you do. So the solution was some absolute next-level, top-notch industrial-grade gaslighting. Because people who had a copy of the encyclopedia were sent some extra encyclopedia pages on the Bering Strait, along with instructions on how to cut the pages out on Beria and replace them with the new pages.
But they can still read the old pages.
You could still read the old pages, but you're not supposed to read the old pages. And the reason why this is such an amazing, Olympic level manipulation is that people they're basically being instructed to participate in the lie. They've been asked to gaslight themselves. This is when you know you're dealing with real professionals, because what you've done is you forced the target of the lie to share the responsibility for the lie with the liars.
Okay. And would people get in trouble if they didn't cut out the pages? Would the state police come to your house and check your encyclopedia? How do you enforce this? It's preposterous.
Well, I will say this. If the secret police come to your house, which, of course, in an authoritarian state is not an unusual thing to happen, and they find that your encyclopedia still has those pages in it, you're now, you're a traitor. Despite the fact that you could say, but you were the ones who told me this guy was a hero. This is the thing about gaslighting. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't have any kind of consistency. It's full of all these weird contradictions. And that in itself is part of the weaponizing of this. Because what this does is it makes people feel completely disoriented. It makes people feel like everything is possible. Nothing is true and everything is possible. And it should be fairly obvious why this is a poisonous thing to have in a relationship, either with a partner or a leader, because you just end up in a state of bewilderment. You end up with nowhere that you can stand that feels safe. You lose confidence in your own ability to discern reality. And ironically, that makes you even more reliant on the person who's gaslighting you.
It must make people feel totally out of their minds. I put my keys in the key dish in the front of the house, and one day Miranda borrowed my keys and she put them somewhere else. She wasn't trying to gaslight me. She wasn't trying to, mess with me, but she did by accident. I go to the front of the house, my keys aren't there, but in my mind, I swear I put them there, and I start to feel nuts over just this accidental interaction. When reality doesn't match up to what you saw, you start to go out of your mind very quickly.
We like to think that we have a really firm grasp on reality, but the truth is exactly as you say. It doesn't take very much for us to start to think, wait a second, can I trust my own perceptions? Can I trust my own memories? And of course, perception and memory are flawed, but when you're being gaslit, it gets cranked up to 11. And so once you have internalized that idea that your own experiences, your own memories can't be trusted, then what happens is you become dependent on that other person who's gaslighting you to provide and explain reality to you. And we end up staying in these abusive situations, either politically or personally, for longer, because that's the only life raft we see.
Yeah. Now, this would never happen in Canada, where you live and where I grew up. This would never happen in the United States, except for maybe the Vietnam War example you gave. But suppose someone found themselves in this situation where they think maybe the government's lying to them with a narrative. What do you recommend someone do?
Well, the first thing you should do is recognize that it's happening and understand that those feelings that you're having of alienation, of anxiety, maybe depression, those are coming from this gaslighting situation. Because when you no longer feel like you have any kind of grasp on a truth or reality, it results in loss of agency, results in lacks of feeling of freedom. And it's a feedback loop, because the gaslighting reduces confidence, and then that lack of confidence drags you back into the parasitic embrace of the gaslighter. And of course, like almost every situation, the situation is complicated by generative AI now, because it's given the gaslighter two new weapons against the truth. They can tell us that a real video is just AI.
Yeah.
They can show us an AI video and tell us it's the truth. And so...
Oh, no.
I know, but there is hope.
Okay, give it to me. I need it at this point.
Yeah. Because, I mean, to understand the hope, we got to get a bit sadder first. Because one of the tragedies is that gaslighting preys on a quality that's actually helpful for us to get closer to the truth, and that's self-doubt. Self-doubt is a good and healthy thing for us to have. When we're not 100% certain of our beliefs, we're more willing to listen to new evidence and arguments and things like that. But that's what the gaslighter takes advantage of, that self-doubt. So we need to kind of join that philosophical humility with a steely-eyed focus on reason and rationality to help us make sure that people aren't trying to spit in our faces and tell us that it's raining.
Wow. This has been a great discussion on gaslighting. Thanks for sharing those examples. You can check out Nathan Radke, professor of conspiracy studies at Humber Polytechnic's podcast. It's called the Uncover Up Conspiracy Cast. Nathan, we have just a few moments. What could I look forward to, or what could I hear if I checked out your podcast today?
Well, coming up, we're going to distract ourselves a bit. We're going to move away from all this horror and talk about a famous alien encounter in England that happened in Rendlesham Forest, it's considered like England's Roswell. But as you'll see, if you'll check out the podcast, it's much more interesting and compelling than Roswell ever was.
Ooh, I'm looking forward to that. Nathan Radke is also an alleged non-alien. Nathan, thanks for joining me on Conspiracy Corner. This has been a great joy.
Thanks for having me on.
Coming up next, things are going to get a little salacious, so sensitive listeners or parents with small children, you'll want to be advised. Here's what we're going to cover. We've all heard casual sex is bad for your heart or your head or your future, that it's emotionally risky. But psychologists researched it, and it turns out casual sex can boost your confidence, your desire, even your happiness. We'll tell you about it and the psychology behind wanting it in a second.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644. Please be advised that the following program contains audio content that may be graphic and potentially triggering for some listeners. This content may include descriptions or sounds that some may find disturbing. Listener discretion is strongly advised. This is The Last Show with David Cooper.
For years, you might have been told that casual sex is somehow bad for you, but there's new research on single adults that say it might actually boost your confidence, happiness, and your desire. So, the question, is no strings attached sex getting an unfair reputation? That is what we're going to explore here with clinical psychology researcher at the Sexuality and Wellbeing Lab at the University of British Columbia, Anuki Amarakoon. Anuki, welcome to the show.
I'm so happy to be here.
So there are some negative stereotypes, perhaps unfair ones, that get thrown around casual sex, that it's risky, maybe for your sexual health, maybe emotionally. What made you want to sort of look at this question? Is casual sex a bad thing?
Well, I think, the population of singles is increasing over time, and there's this general sense that single people are having casual sex. Like if we think about, Sex in the City or Friends, there's this portrayal of an abundance of sexual opportunities. But when we actually look at the research, most of the research on partnered sex has looked at couples. So we don't actually know a lot about how many singles are actually having casual sex, what these relationships look like, and how they're being experienced by single people. So I wanted to look at just that. So what is the frequency in the population that people are having casual sex? What are the characteristics of these relationships? And are there certain factors that differentiate single people who have casual sex versus people that don't? Specifically in terms of attachment, how the overall sense that people have in terms of their evaluation of being single and their well-being. Do these two groups differ in those categories?
Interesting. I think the scene that gets painted in like the show Sex in the City is you meet someone on a night out, you have a great night together. In the morning you say, hey, you want a cup of coffee? The answer might be yes. And after that, they're gone. They're a stranger. Yeah. They're in your life. They're no longer in your life. Is that the scene that plays out for most single people? Or do things in practice with the people you've spoken to play out a little differently?
Well, the term casual sexual relationship just captures sexual activity outside of a romantic relationship. So it's a really big umbrella term. And we know from previous research that there's actually a lot of variability in what those relationships look like. Some of them vary in how well the partners know each other, whether the relationship is sexually exclusive or not, how often people see each other. So there's a lot of variability. In our study, what we found was that on average, these relationships were low in emotional closeness. They weren't really that sexually exclusive, and people weren't really interested in making that sexual relationship transition into a romantic relationship. So they were closer to what you described of just, a one-off or someone you don't really know that well, but you do see sometimes.
But closeness in that setup, in that kind of relationship, is that something you see? There's this popular idea that casual sex is about keeping someone at arm's length. Does your study kind of challenge that perception?
I wouldn't say that it challenges that perception that the relationships are emotionally close, but there is a tendency on average within these relationships for folks to have more than a few contacts. So on average, like 2 to 3 contacts, sexual contacts and social contacts, but the emotional closeness remains low.
Got it. And so who are these contacts? Are they strangers they're matching with on apps? Are they friends? Are they exes? Are they old friends? Like, who are the people that people are having casual encounters with like that?
Well, in our first study, what we did was we had these written responses where folks were writing about, it was an open-ended question, are you having casual sex? Tell us about it. And folks were writing about it. So we looked at those responses first in our first study. And for the people who actually described the relationship, we found that about 70% were acquaintances or friends. But in our second study, we measured it a bit differently. And we looked at how close do you feel to this person emotionally, not necessarily these categories of are you friends, are you strangers? And the emotional closeness was low. So I think taken together, it seems like these are people folks know, but aren't emotionally very close with.
Let's talk about what I mentioned at the beginning, that these negative stereotypes about those who have casual sex, that it's emotionally risky, that it's somehow bad and negative. For people that engage in it, what did you end up finding? My understanding is they end up a little more confident about themselves, about their, about them as sexual beings.
Yeah, so we conducted 2 studies. So the first one was exploratory, and the second one was a replication and extension study. So we wanted to see if what we found was consistent over different samples. And what we found across both studies was that what really differentiates single people who have casual sex versus those that don't was, firstly, that people who are sexually active, singles who are sexually active, report lower attachment avoidance. That means that they're generally more comfortable with closeness and intimacy. And then the other thing we found was that these singles who are sexually active reported more perceived mate value. And what that is essentially a sense that of how desirable you think yourself to be as a mate or as a partner, sexual or romantic. So folks that were having casual sex saw themselves as more desirable. And the last thing we found was that, unsurprisingly, these singles who are having casual sex are also more sexually satisfied. So they're kind of getting what they want out of the interaction in terms of their sexual goals.
Now, this goes against this common stereotype that casual sex is going to make you feel bad about yourself. It looks like casual sex can be a confidence boost. Were you surprised by that finding?
Yes and no. I think so much of the previous research has focused on college students, so in college hookup culture, and it's kind of a unique context, right? There's typically a lot of, it's more common to have alcohol involved in the hookup. There's less sexual experience. Folks are younger. So our population is a bit different. They're older. Most of them are outside of school or university. But at the same time, we know that having sex generally is associated, the more sex you have in a partnered context, the more satisfied you are. And, if you're afraid of intimacy, like people who are when they're avoidant in terms of attachment, they're not going to be drawn to, an intimate sexual experience. So it's not surprising that what we found was that, folks who are having casual sex are more satisfied and are more comfortable with closeness.
There are those that might say casual sex is secretly somehow about auditioning for a relationship. But participants that you spoke to, they're having casual sex. Did they seem interested in a long-term relationship?
Yeah, not really. This was one of our key findings. So what we found was we compared whether folks who were having casual sex and folks who weren't differed in terms of how much they wanted to be in a committed romantic relationship. And across both studies, what we found was that no, they didn't. There wasn't any differences. So it seems like, this casual sexual relationship is distinct to these folks from being in a romantic relationship. And that experience doesn't change how much they want or don't want to be in a relationship.
I would never want anyone to feel bad about having a lot of casual sex or some, but for those that are hearing things maybe from their parents or for their friends that they're somehow broken for wanting to do that, what would you tell them from your research, but also just as like a clinical psychologist?
We can't say causally that if you have casual sex, you're going to feel really happy. You're going to feel satisfied. You're going to feel like a more attractive partner. But it seems like going out there and doing that isn't associated with poorer well-being. It actually seems to be associated with greater well-being. So if that's something that you're interested in, it seems like the landscape out there is going to result in you kind of getting what you're hoping for in terms of feeling more sexually satisfied, feeling more desirable.
Anuki, thanks for sharing your research with me and coming on the show.
Thank you. This was so fun.
In a few moments' time, fermented foods, bacteria, fungus, it's all great for you, and it turns out we don't eat enough of it. So in a few moments' time, the great reasons these foods are good for you, and also fungus. I love topics that include fungus.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644. Love, science, and the most outrageous news. It's all here. The last show with David Cooper.
Are you eating enough fermented food? From yogurt to sourdough to kombucha to kimchi, these funky foods might be doing more for you than just tasting weird. They could be protecting your gut. They could be good for your long-term health. And it turns out most people aren't eating enough of them. I'm here with Ben Willing, a microbiology professor at the University of Alberta, to discuss everything about fermentation in food. Ben, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
So at a most basic level, when we say fermented food, what is happening to the food? What is the process of fermentation that changes food from one thing to another?
Well, it's microbes, of course, that are changing the food. And so through their activities and their enzyme activities, it changes the food to make it usually better.
And is that through fungus? Is that through bacteria? Is that through some magical pickling process that scientists don't quite know about?
So it can certainly be both bacteria and fungus, and it can be both sometimes.
Great. So I'm eating bacteria and fungus when I eat that sourdough bread is what you're telling me.
You got it.
And that is good for me. All right. There's a lot of evidence that these things are good for you. And these come from big population studies, not just clinical trials. How are they good for you? How are fermented foods healthy for your body?
Well, the question of the large trials is actually one of the challenges. So we don't fully know that they're always the best for you, but the evidence is building, and that's actually kind of why we have an initiative around it, trying to build the evidence to say that it is good for you. A couple fermented foods that are good for you, like yogurt, and have clear effects. They do things like glucose lowering, improving kind of aspects around diabetes. That have been demonstrated, and other ones are doing things like lowering your cholesterol levels, and importantly, lowering your inflammation. And that's kind of the one that's gotten some recent attention.
So if these foods are so good for you and people aren't eating them, are their diets like too clean? Are they too sterile? Clean and sterile sounds like it's supposed to be good for you, but when you eat too many foods that way, what ends up happening?
Well, it's an interesting question around there's a group talking about the idea that it's actually the amount of microbes that we consume. I'm not sure that I'm convinced by all that evidence because it's hard to separate whether it's a fermented food or it's a food with microbes because, of course, usually they're going to go together. So the idea is that if you eat more microbes, that's going to stimulate your immune system, and that's a good thing. My personal belief is that it's actually related to the things that the microbes produce. And so while they're fermenting, they make different types of molecules that have kind of benefits both to the microbial community that's in your gut as well as to affecting directly our bodies.
Let's talk about the gut microbiome, all the bacteria in your stomach. I once heard a researcher call it the forgotten organ in the sense that it's so important to your body. It's like your heart, it's like your lungs, but it's not your cells. It's foreign cells, it's bacteria cells, it's fungus cells. Why is your gut microbiome so important for your health?
Yeah, so many ways. And I teach a class and I talk about the gut microbiome is essentially another organ. And if we didn't have a microbiome, we would be so susceptible to infections that would come in. And it also kind of shapes our physiology. We would look totally different. Our gut would be much more thin and frail if we didn't have microbes stimulating that surface. And so those microbes, they've co-evolved with us and they help us be who we are and are then protected from some of the nasties out there.
You teach a whole class on the microbes in your gut, so you can definitely answer this question in 30 seconds or a minute. You can boil it all down. I'm sure that's easy to do. But in what concrete, everyday way can we understand what these things do for us?
Oh, well, I mean, the most basic thing is the fact that they take things that we can't digest, like fiber, and turn them into beneficial molecules that kind of tell our gut to be healthy, make it non-permissive to things. And they also just provide us energy. They deliver that fiber into something that we can actually utilize. Other things, they produce vitamins that we can also utilize. So a couple of clear benefits that you get from them.
So it's not get your fiber, eat your fiber. It's put fiber in your body so your microbes can eat your fiber. That's what we should be telling kids.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a growing idea and a colleague wrote a book, a children's book around this. Essentially, it's about feeding the zoo in your gut and making sure that you eat the broccoli and all of those types of foods because that's going to help your microbes that are living in your gut.
You mentioned type 2 diabetes earlier in yogurt. How does that all work?
There's a lot of mystery that goes on as far as understanding exactly how these things work. I mean, that data is based on, the large population studies and making associations between people that consume yogurt and that reduced glucose levels. And how does it work? There's many possible mechanisms and, inflammation is one of them and reducing inflammation, but certainly other possibilities as well.
What are some foods that people should be eating more? I mentioned a few at the top, but I don't think people realize like sourdough bread is a fermented food. I always just thought of it as, bread. What are some of the ones on the lists that people should know about that they could eat more? And then what are some of your favorites?
Some of the ones that you should eat more, probably some of the fermented dairies. So whether it's the yogurt or kefir. There's also some of the fermented vegetables. Those are the ones that kind of high on the list as far as likely benefit. The nicest example of fermented vegetable is sauerkraut and kimchi. Fermented cabbage. We know that cabbage on its own is good for you, but if you add that layer of fermentation, you actually get that much more benefit out of it.
And your favorite?
Kimchi is my favorite.
Kimchi is delicious. I like that one as well. Is cheese always good for you? Because I know cheese is on a list, but if I'm eating like high-fat cheddar cheese every day on like a grilled cheese sandwich, maybe that's not the right move?
Yeah, no, there's certainly a balance, and cheese is certainly included in many healthy dietary recommendations. Maybe on the fermented food space and showing that it has health benefits associated with being fermented, I'd say there's maybe less evidence to support that, but certainly not a bad food. But yeah, excess of anything is a problem.
I shouldn't listen to what you're saying and be like, oh, overproof gin. Alcohol is a fermentation process. Therefore, I should be drinking hard liquor every day. Not all fermented food is created equally, right? Alcohol's not on the list.
Alcohol is not on the list. Of course, there's a bit of evidence that some wines, particularly red wine, has some benefits associated with it, but certainly it's not something to increase consumption of for health outcomes. I also do a bit of work in spontaneous beer fermentation, and sometimes people are always saying, well, maybe it's good for you because it's got more complexity of microbes in spontaneous beer. But I always warn them that maybe it's slightly better than a regular beer, but we have no evidence to say that's the case.
Side note, you could in your lab as a microbiologist make like a vat of beer, drink it with your buddies at school and be like, oh, we're doing research right now, couldn't you?
I guess so.
What would you like people to change about their diet, or one small thing anyone listening can sort of listen to today and make a minor change and have it improve their gut health?
Yeah, I think there's two things. One is always fiber is good for you, but also then incorporation of some fermented foods, and it adds some nice diversity, maybe gets us away from some things that are maybe less good for us.
Well, Ben, it has been a joy talking to you about fermented foods. Thank you so much for being on the show.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Ben Willing is a microbiology professor at the University of Alberta. In a few moments, something juicy for people who use chatbot tools. When they're too nice to you, they can inflate your ego, convincing you you're better than average. So what are the risks for you and those who use things like ChatGPT? Details in a minute. I'm David Cooper. This is The Last Show.
Want to be part of The Last Show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644. When the day is done, we're just getting started. The Last Show with David Cooper.
The phrase AI sycophancy, it should have been the word of the year for 2025, but what does it actually mean? And when AI treats you a little bit too well, what happens to you? How do you see yourself? How smart do you think you are? Well, I'm here with someone who's researched this. His name is Steve Rathje. He's an incoming assistant professor of human-computer interaction at Carnegie Mellon University. Steve, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
I kind of gave a crude definition. I said it's when AI treats you a little too well. But what is AI sycophancy? I've heard this a lot, but I just want to start with it.
Yeah, so we define AI sycophancy as basically when AI tends to be a little too agreeable and tends to flatter you a bit too much, and tends to tell you a bit too much of what you want to hear. The phrase really became popularized in April of 2025. There was a big controversy with OpenAI when OpenAI released a new model, ChatGPT 4.0, and this model was accused of being basically way too sycophantic. There were a lot of very funny screenshots on Twitter where, for instance, AI was basically like flattering in agreeing with terrible ideas, like telling people to stop taking all of their essential medications, or telling basically everyone that they had a genius level IQ. So that's when sycophancy became super popular as a concept, and OpenAI tried to do things to reduce sycophancy in their model, but it became very widely discussed around then. And so my colleagues and I, we tried to examine in a series of psychological experiments the actual psychological consequences of interacting with sycophantic chatbots.
At first, a chatbot telling you you're great, you're perfect, you're amazing. That idea you had that you're asking me about, that idea is the best one I've ever heard. It seems totally harmless. But maybe it isn't. So let's talk about these experiments. What did you find?
Right, maybe it isn't. So basically the setup for these experiments, and we conducted 3 very similar experiments, we had thousands of participants. We had them interact with various different chatbots. One was a chatbot that was designed to be sycophantic. It would basically flatter people, agree with them. One was a chatbot that was designed to be gently disagreeable. So it would sort of gently show people opposing perspectives and maybe try to open their mind to other viewpoints. One was just a regular chatbot like ChatGPT or Gemini. We basically took a few frontier models. And then we also had a control condition where people just talked about with the benefits of owning dogs and cats with a chatbot. So in all these conditions, people discuss political topics, but we're currently analyzing non-political topics as well in follow-up experiments. And broadly, this is what we found. So this isn't too unexpected, but people really liked the sycophantic chatbots. They really enjoyed them. They said that they would want to interact with them again. And basically, as expected, people really did not like these disagreeable chatbots that would gently challenge their opinion. We also found that the sycophantic chatbots cause people to entrench their beliefs, basically become more extreme about their prior beliefs. And the disagreeable chatbots had the opposite effect. They led people to become more moderate about their beliefs. And now here's where things get really interesting. This is one of the effects that really surprised me, actually. We found that people rated the sycophantic chatbots as highly unbiased, but they found the disagreeable chatbots to be extremely biased.
Okay, so we're biased on the idea of what we think bias is, because if someone's agreeing with you, that doesn't mean they're unbiased.
Yeah, exactly. And this is this relates to what psychologists call naive realism. Basically, people think that how they view the world is objective and correct. And they think if someone disagrees with them, it's because they fall for propaganda or because they're biased. And I think because people think that they are objective and correct, they think that a chatbot that agrees with them is also objective and correct. They don't realize it's because of the sycophancy. People seem blind to sycophancy. And I think that's why sycophancy is such a challenging problem, because people don't even recognize it. They're just like, oh, if this chatbot is agreeing with me, it must be because I'm correct. It's not because of how this chatbot is designed.
And what about feelings of your own intelligence, of your own ability, own ability to, I don't know, get the responses to questions right, or your own, your ability in a particular area of study that you might not know that much about?
Yeah, so this was one of my favorite results from the study. So this extends on a line of work in psychology called the better than average effect. So most people think that they are better than average on a number of desirable traits. Most people think they're more intelligent than the average person, more empathic, more moral than the average person. And this is, of course, a statistical impossibility, because you can't have half of the population being, more than half the population being above average. By definition, only half the population can be above average. And this effect is so strong. There's one study that finds that basically criminals who are in prison for violent crimes believe that they are more moral than the average person. So this is just like a very broad effect that extends across the population, even if it contradicts reality.
Don't quote me on this. I don't remember the study, but there's some high percentage of drivers who think they're better than average, like 90% or something think they're great drivers. And that's just a statistical impossibility.
Right. And this was one of the original studies on the better than average effect conducted in the 1970s, was on people thinking, basically everyone thinking they're better drivers than average. So we wanted to know whether AI sycophancy might amplify this better than average effect. And indeed, what we found is that after interacting with the sycophantic chatbots, people rated themselves as more intelligent than average, as more empathic than average, as more moral and kind and insightful and better at asking questions than the average person. And the disagreeable chatbot had the exact opposite effect. It didn't make people realize that they are worse than average. Basically, everyone still kind of showed this better than average effect, but the disagreeable chatbot reduced it by a little bit. So in other words, the disagreeable chatbot made people more accurate in their perceptions, because, it's more accurate that people are on average closer to average. So yeah, this is concerning, because if sycophantic chatbots are constantly flattering us and saying, oh, you're so empathic, you're so intelligent, it might amplify this cognitive bias that a lot of people have.
And to your point, this seems all fun and games, these findings. It's kind of silly. It's fun to talk about. But when we think of what people are really using chatbots for these days to do their jobs, I mean, there are people that kind of claim they're in romantic relationships or use chatbots as therapists against everyone's advice. When people are using these chatbots chatbots in really serious, big ways in their lives. This outcome is kind of alarming, isn't it?
Right. Yeah. And I think it's concerning in a variety of domains. We studied it in the political domain, so it could increase political polarization if people's pre-existing viewpoints are constantly being affirmed. But it's also concerning when we think about this, this term AI psychosis is being thrown around by the media a lot.
Yeah, we've covered it on the show, yeah.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah. And it's kind of a fuzzy term, and people have a lot of disagreement about what it actually is. But I think that sycophancy might be particularly concerning, and this is more speculative. We don't have a ton of research on this, but basically for individuals with mental health vulnerabilities, if people have their delusions affirmed. And I gave the example before of like ChatGPT, for instance, saying, it's a good idea for someone to stop taking essential medications, for instance. If you're affirming sort of the delusions of mentally vulnerable individuals, that could cause a lot of significant problems.
Well, I know that I'm better than the average person at identifying the fact that I'm an idiot. Most people aren't willing to do that. Knowing what you know and knowing that a lot of people use these tools, but perhaps don't want to be biased like this, what recommendations would you have to the average chatbot user?
Yeah, so one is to just be aware of sycophancy and to know that this is a problem. That can be really powerful. But then another thing is, if you use ChatGPT, you can actually customize your ChatGPT, where you can kind of go to the settings and you can change the system prompt, or you can change ChatGPT's personality to tell it to be more cynical or tell it to show you alternate perspectives. You can specifically prompt ChatGPT to act differently. You can say, maybe be a devil's advocate and show me opposing perspectives. So that's one recommendation here. But another recommendation is for the tech companies to maybe update their models.
Well, Steve Rathje is an incoming assistant professor of human-computer interaction at Carnegie Mellon University. Steve, thank you for being here. This has been a great chat.
Thanks for having me. This was fun.
That's a wrap on our show. Please subscribe to the Last Show podcast. To find out more details, head to our website. That's at www.lastshow.pizza. That's not .com, it's .pizza. Yes, that is a real domain name. Or search David Cooper Last Show on your favorite podcast app. We'll pop up and you can subscribe. We'll be back tomorrow night. I'm David Cooper. This was not the first show.
Big tax changes this year could mean a bigger refund, and Jackson Hewitt knows how to get you your biggest. You'll get $100 just to try us. That won't make you filthy rich, but definitely gas plus groceries rich. And since we know all the new tax codes, you could get thousands back, which would make you low-key loaded. Or at least wealthy adjacent? Go with our trusted pros and get $100 to switch. Rest easy. Jackson Hewitt's got your taxes. Guaranteed. Limited time offer for new clients. Participating locations only. Details at jacksonhewitt.com.